Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Advanced Pressbooks, Advanced Publishing session with Pressbooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today is sort of a continuation of the Getting Started with Pressbooks session. And both of these sessions happen every month. And it's an opportunity for everyone in the Pressbooks communities to sort of meet each other, and also a great opportunity for you to get to know more about Pressbooks, getting started with your project, and also an opportunity to ask us questions. So before we get started with the session, I want to go over some basic resources that we offer. If you are an end user at your institution, if you have any questions, you will have to go to your network manager, who will be able to answer those questions for you. However, if you are resourceful and you'd like to find the answer right away, we have some documentation that you can rely on for that purpose. So here is our Pressbooks user guide. It's just at guide.pressbooks.com. There's been a lot of editing done recently, so it's all up to date, which is awesome. A lot of the stuff that we cover in the first session is covered under part 3, Make Your Book. And a lot of the concepts that we cover today will be more in the sort of the sections down here, which pertain more to educational features and uses. So I would really recommend that you go and check these out. Today, I'll cover things like hypothesis and math and H5P, and these chapters will cover them even in greater depth, which is awesome. So I'd recommend that you go and have a look, and there's a link to that there. Like I said, these happen every month. If you're confused or concerned or want to know more about exactly what is covered during these sessions, I would recommend that you check out this guide chapter. It covers everything that there is to know. It covers all of the criteria that I like to meet when I'm giving these sessions every month. Here's the one that gets. Here's a session that gets held before this every month, and then here's the session that we're holding today, Advanced Pressbooks EDU Publishing. So I'll also copy that and put that into the chat. And we also have a YouTube channel. There are so many videos on here, lots of short demos, lots of instructional videos. We also have product updates that are held every month to tell you what's new about the product. There's our product manager Steele. And if you're if you like learning more through video, this is a great place to come and check it out. So there that is. And then lastly, the last thing that I wanted to cover is the Pressbooks directory. I'll touch more on this today, but the directory is an repertory of many, many books. It's ever growing. Your book could also be on here, so long as your book is public. It's a great place for people to come. You don't need to have a Pressbooks subscription to have access to this. And if you do, it means that you can remix and revise the content that's on here that's openly licensed. So it's a great place to come. And like I said, we'll cover it in a little further depth momentarily. So today's session is all about the stuff that isn't so beginner, perhaps, in terms of creating your book and editing it and exporting it, but rather the stuff that you can include to sort of embellish your book and make your book more robust. So here I am on my network. So navigate to your institution's Pressbooks domain and log in. And I'm going to head into the admin panel. All the stuff that you saw during the last session, and going to under my books. I believe that last time I had shown you how you can clone a book onto your network, which is a process in which you take an existing Pressbooks book and you create a copy of it on your network. And I think I had stopped here and said, look at this brilliant book. You have it on your network now, and you can, add a chapter, delete a chapter, edit a chapter, so long as the license allows you to do so. There's one more thing that I didn't cover last time in the beginner session, and it's a feature that we actually created to go along with the cloning feature, which is enabling source comparison. So here on the back end of the book, I went into appearance and theme options, and going down, there's a button that says enable source comparison, and this allows readers to compare content with the original book from which it was cloned. So what this means is that once I save changes and go into visit the book, I have to wait while it saves. Awesome. And then going into visit book, when I hop into a chapter, I'll now see that at the bottom, there is a there's a button that says show comparison with the original. So what this will do is if you were to adapt this book further, it would show you how many additions and deletions, how many differences there are between the current version of the original versus the current version of your text. And like I said, we developed this particularly for educational uses so that you can sort of see exactly what was removed and what was added. So this is available if this interests you. This is only available on the webbook because, as you can see, it's JavaScript enabled, and for it to be responsive, it has to be on the web. So just keep that in mind, but it's a great tool to have. So moving on, there's a chapter that I really wanted to focus for today. This is our demo chapter. It's about the poet Loreen Niedeker's poem, Black Hawk Held. And I believe our product manager, Steele, made this chapter. He loves Loreen Niedeker and has a PhD in English. And I think he sort of centered this demo chapter around this poem. And it's great. And he's incorporated a lot of the Pressbooks features on here so that it's a demo chapter where he squeezed in all of the features so that I can demo it to you here. Firstly, you can see all of these highlights on the page. This is Hypothesis. Hypothesis is an open source social annotation tool. It really goes beyond the boundaries of what people think as traditional highlighting and annotating, and rather it's used as it can be used for a wide variety of purposes, such as note taking and also having discourse with your class, and is a great way to incorporate lots of different activities, so to speak. And I'll dive into what this looks like. And there's also a lot of different ways in which you can use this tool, as I mentioned. So I hope that demoing this today will give you some inspiration on how this can be used for your class. Secondly is glossary terms, which I covered last time. I won't cover it today, but if you're interested, there is a guide chapter all about how to create glossary terms. And there is also, I cover it in the beginner Pressbooks session. And then moving down, there's this glaringly obvious, really cool interactive tool here. This is H5P. If you're not familiar with H5P, H5P is also another open source interactive tool, but it's primarily meant for activities. There are between 45, I think maybe even 47 activities now. They have so many different kinds of activities that you can create and incorporate into your book. And with your Pressbooks EDU license, you will automatically have access to H5P and also to Hypothesis. As you can see, we really like working with other open source platforms that sort of have similar mission statements to us. And we all work harmoniously together despite all being different things. And then moving further down, you can see the actual poem, Black Hawk Held. It's formatted really nicely into a table. And what I like about this so much, and what I like showing about this, is that tables seem really quite not boring, but rather very static. And what's so great about this is that it shows you that tables don't just have to be used for values and a chart. Rather, it can be formatted to really fit your needs and for you to include whatever kind of information you want. And then moving further down, you can see that there's more H5P activities. And then there is a YouTube video that's been embedded down here. I'll cover media in a little bit, but if you remember from last time, I actually did, a big part of what I show is how to upload images and YouTube videos. So go check that out if you're interested in that. And then a footnote down here that I also covered last time, for which there's also a guide chapter, as with almost all of this. So I'd recommend that you go and check that out. So I'll cover each of these concepts a little bit more in depth. And I'll start with H5P. So when I actually go into the admin panel, I'm going to just continue to create in this book while I can. And to create H5P activities in any book, you have to go firstly into plugins, and you will see a button that says activate H5P. So you're going to click on that to display the H5P content module. If you've cloned a book and that book already has H5P activities, the chances are you will already see the H5P content module enabled because that book has already come with H5P activities. However, if you create a new book, you will have to go into plugins and enable the H5P content, but the access is all the same. it just enables for you to be able to create content on H5P. So from here, I'm going to click add new, and then I'm going to say I consent, give me the hub, which will present me with this beautiful H5P hub that is really lovely to navigate around, lots of buttons and sort of indications to let you know what exactly you're creating. One of my favorite examples to show here is the image slider. And what I like so much about this is that when I actually go to demo this, oh, this is not the example I was looking for. I think there's, as you can see, there's 47 different kinds of it's this one, 47 different kinds of activities. I'm sure image, this one is also fantastic. I just haven't had the time to test it out. As you can see here, I guess it's just sliding through different images. But what I like to show so much about this one is that it's fun. And you can see here that it's a juxtaposition of two images here. And there's many different examples. And what's so great is that there's a title. You can see who created the activity. You can see a description of the activity as well as images. So for multiple choice, there would be a sample question with the answers below it. And it's provided for all of these different examples. And as you can see, they're not necessarily just activities. There's also charts and QR codes, creating QR codes. There's so many different kinds of activities on here that can be used for a wide variety of purposes, which I think is a true advantage of having access to H5P. So that is how you can navigate around the H5P module. And from here, I'll show you how you can create an activity. So let's drag the words because it seems self-explanatory enough. Okay, awesome. And I'm going to click use. And from here, I always do provincial capital cities because it's easy and fun. And from here, I'll say Winnipeg is the capital city of Manitoba. Let's take something really obvious. Quebec City is the capital. And from here, you can include overall feedback. So I'm going to add a range, and let's say I only have 2 questions. So you're either 50% right or 100% right. And I'll say halfway there, and I'll say correct. So you can add your own feedback for this defined score range. You can add as many ranges as you'd like. If you had 10 activities, you can have 10 different ranges, or you can have 3 or 2, and it gives you the flexibility of doing this. There's also behavioral settings, which is really nice and allows for greater accessibility in the tool itself. So for each different kind of activity, there's different behavioral settings. So in this case, it's just a drag and drop activity, which means that if the students get it wrong, then you can either enable retry or disable retry. Whereas for, let's say you are teaching a language class and you're doing fill in the blanks, it might allow for a behavioral setting in one of those activities as, do we allow for spelling errors? How important is spelling for this, second grade French class versus like a second year university French class, right? So there's a lot of different behavioral settings. And then even for the activities that might not seem so obvious to have behavioral settings, there are behavioral settings actually. And in the case of this image juxtaposition, it's asking, do you want the slider to be from bottom to top or from left to right? And at which point do you want the slider to start, 75% of the way down the page, or 25% of the way right of the page. So there's a lot of different settings that you can set for H5P. And I like to go a little bit in depth into this simply because there are so many different kinds of activities, and there's so much availability that you have that to cover this and to show you exactly, walking you through how this is done may be helpful for you. The last thing that I want to cover is metadata. There's a chance that someone comes across your book and you're teaching about Northern Indigenous health and healthcare, and they really like this activity that you created. Then by having it licensed to CC BY, they can reuse this activity. Or if you're really against someone using your activity, then you can mark it as copyright, and they won't even have the chance to reuse the activity. So from here, let's say I give it CC BY, not that anyone will use this very simple activity. I'll click save metadata and I'll click create. And from here, I can attempt the activity. So I'll go into here, and I'll click check. And it gives me the response that I had set for the score range as well as my score. So this is a really great way to test out the activity before you incorporate it into your book. And you can see that I gave it a CC BY license. So on here, you can see my rights of use. You can see that someone can embed this activity into their book if they'd like. And there's also a reuse button. And this is dependent on my license. It means that now someone can download this as an H5P file, and someone else at another institution, if they're using H5P, whether it be on Pressbooks or not, they can reuse this content. And they would obviously have to adhere to the license that I give it. So that is sort of how you create H5P activities. It's a great tool to have, like I said. And from here, if you want to use this in your book, there's two ways that you can incorporate H5P activities into your book. Firstly, I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to, just for ease, I'm going to add a chapter. Test chapter. And from here, I'm going to add my H5P activity, or alternatively, there's a button up here that says add H5P, and I can click insert on the activity that I just created. You can see it gives you the exact same thing. And from here, I'll preview, and you can see that my activities have been brought in perfectly, and it's been brought in twice because I had shown you both of the ways on how you can incorporate this into your book. So that is a little bit about H5P. You can also choose to upload H5P activities. You can see on the Pressbooks directory here that if you are, teaching about, if you're teaching and you want to find H5P activities, let's say I'm looking for at least 50 H5P activities, and I'm also an English instructor, then I can look on here. There's a button that will take you directly to all of the H5P activities in that book. And from here, let's say that I have a question set and it allows me to reuse. Then what I can do is download this activity. I can go into, instead of creating content, you can click upload, which is right next to it, and you can upload this file. And from here, you can see that once I click use, it will take me into the activity itself, and it will allow for me to further build on this activity and edit it, like I said, depending on the license of the activity. So you can see here that they configured this, they created this activity, but I have the option to edit. So this is a little bit about H5P and how you can get started. Good news is that I think H5P is going to release an H5P hub soon, where all of the H5P activities that are publicly licensed sort of live on there, so that there's users and creators and faculty and authors, et cetera, can look on this one place to help get started with finding inspiration or looking for H5P activities to adapt. The next thing that I wanted to cover is about Hypothesis, which I had shown you as a social annotation tool. Unlike enabling H5P in for your book, as you can see, you don't see Hypothesis here, even though it's a plugin effectively. And that is because Hypothesis is enabled at the root level. So it's already enabled for your institution. You have to go into, where is it? On settings, and you will see Hypothesis here. So you don't have to turn on anything in plugins. It will always be there. And you just have to show where it goes in the book. So on here, you can see that I have chosen to have highlights on by default. And you can also choose to have the sidebar open by default. Just keep in mind that it takes up about a third of the page. And then under content settings, you can decide where Hypothesis is loaded. So from here, let's say I allow this for chapters because that's the only place where I want, other people making annotations. I can do that, and I could click Save Changes. And you can also determine where else in the book you'd like this. Some people have enabled it for all parts of the book. So that's something to keep in mind. And then going into Visit Book, because Hypothesis is made directly, the edits are not on the book, but it's at the public level of the book. So when I go into, let's say, if I hop into a chapter, you can now see that on the right-hand side, it will just take a moment to load. There's this bar here now. And by opening this, you can see that I am able to make annotations. So from here, I'm going to go and log in. You do need an account for Hypothesis. And the question I get most frequently about Hypothesis is, can I log in with my Pressbooks account, or do I need a separate Hypothesis account? The answer to that question is you do need your own Hypothesis account. And the reason for that is because Hypothesis is its own functioning platform and software. We've just happened to integrate it onto Pressbooks. And even though it might seem like a slight inconvenience, it's actually a really great thing that Hypothesis asks you to sign up on its own, because it means that anywhere across the web where Hypothesis is being used and where you can make annotations, this will allow you to make annotations outside of the Pressbooks world. Is a really great tool for you to make annotations anywhere you'd like. So keep that in mind. You will have to make a Hypothesis account. It's very quick and easy. And once you do so, you will now be logged in and you should be able to start using Hypothesis. What you can do really easily is to get started is just highlight. And once you highlight something that you want to annotate from here, you can either highlight just to highlight the term, or you can click annotate, and this will help you make annotation terms. So I might say, remember the definition, use keywords. And from here, as you can see, this text box takes markdown. So if you are a savvy formatter, you can choose to do that. There's also all of these visual editor tools that can help you. What's so convenient about Hypothesis is that you can embed links. You can embed YouTube videos. You can insert images to help you define this annotation. You can even include math. So it's not just limited to writing just letter-based annotations. You can really go to town on different elements on how you make your annotation as comprehensive as possible. So from here, I can also add tags that will be recorded under my account for this annotation. And if I have a large pool of annotations across my account, then adding tags can prove to be helpful. And from here, what I can do is I can either post to public, which means that now, if any of you were to go to this link, you would find this annotation with my annotation here. Or I can go to only me and post myself. And now you can see that there is a little lock button. This public just means that's on the public layer. And I'll talk about layers in a little bit, but this lock button means that it's only to myself. So now if you're already on this page and you click refresh, this annotation won't be there anymore. So I have to be logged in as myself on the Hypothesis layer in order for me to see this annotation. So it's a really great tool. So if I'm an instructor and I want to tell my students to memorize these key terms for a midterm, then I can post it to public and let them see the annotation. Or if this is an annotation for myself and I'm a student, then I can post this to only myself, and it's a private annotation just for me. From here, you can respond. So this is, like I said, one of the many ways in which Hypothesis can serve many different purposes. If you're a student and you want to tag on to an annotation that your friend or peer made, then you are able to respond. Or if you wanted to make, many different comments about your first annotation, then you can add your own responses. And that's a little bit about just the annotation itself. There's a couple of other things that surround Hypothesis that you might want to be aware of. All of the annotations are labeled and numbered, which is super convenient. There's also this button that says page notes. So as you saw, to make an annotation, you had to highlight a term or highlight a section. However, page notes, as you can see, it didn't highlight anything. It just lets you elaborate on this entire page. So you'd be able to add page notes. Up top, you see a little I button. This helps you hide the annotations. If you remember from when I turned on Hypothesis, it said highlights on by default, which is why when you open the page, it will have an open eye. You can just click on this if you want to hide it and read your book in peace. So those are some of the visibility settings here. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you, actually the second last thing that I wanted to show you, is that you can also create private groups. So just by creating a private group, it will show you a very simple interface here. You just have to give it a name and a description. And once you create the group, it will give you a sharing link, and you can invite anyone who you would like to have as a part of that private annotation group in that group just by sending them the link. And once they click on it, they will join it. And if you ever need to refine that invite link, you just have to go and copy invite link. And this is a really great way to create different breakout rooms. You know, if you're teaching a class of 20 students and you want to have 4 groups of 5 students each, then you can create all 4 of those groups and then send the invite links to those students. A question I do get often is, if I'm an instructor, can I moderate what the students are saying? The answer to that question is no. Hypothesis sort of goes on a sort of open community principle and expects all of its users to follow specific guidelines. So there is a little bit about that. And by and large, I don't think any of the students really are likely to say anything, bad on there. I think, people are interested, and by and large, students and people who are annotating are interested in this. So interested in creating, great annotations. So that's a little bit more about Hypothesis. I know that it's also frequently used as sort of a review tool early on in the Pressbooks writing process. I think it's been used for that purpose, where people will write up a draft, or people will, make comments about the text as a way for people to evaluate the text that they're reading. The last thing that I want to say about Hypothesis is that there is a little share button here. This will allow you to share at the root level, so this public layer. You can also share annotations, just the annotation itself, and it's very easy and convenient to use, and a great way. If I was a student and I saw someone's great annotation, I could send it to a peer or a friend. So that is a little bit more about Hypothesis. There's an entire guide chapter about Hypothesis, and similarly with H5P, it's own standing organization. So they also have more documentation on their end as well, if you're really interested in using either of these tools. And we would encourage the use of them as well. So that is a little bit about Hypothesis. So those are the core sort of bigger, higher level tools that I wanted to cover from the Loreen Niederker chapter that I had shown you. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to cover here today. Firstly is about embedding media. So as I had shown you last time, embedding media, you can do it through the media library or directly from the chapter. But there's a couple of other things about the media, about embedding media that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to go back into my test chapter that I have here. And from here, I'm going to add in, let's say, an image. I'm going to upload a file. And from here, let's say I take a picture of the sunset that I took, and I add in my alt text and et cetera. From here, if I actually go down to attributions, and let's say I give it my name, and I give it a CCBY attribution, and I click insert into chapter, and click save. When you go on the chapter itself, you won't see that the image is inherently attributed. However, if you go into appearance and go into theme options, you can enable media attributions, which means that upon doing so and going into the chapter and going back to my test chapter, lots of clicking of buttons here. What you'll see at the bottom of that page is you'll now see the media attributions reflected. So I didn't give this a very creative title. I just let my computer name it. But this is a great way to present all of the media, all of the attributions for the files that you're using. There's many different ways that you can attribute media. Lots of people like to incorporate them directly into the caption of the image itself. But this will create the media attribution for you so long as you define it on the so long as you define it on the media module when you're adding the image. So I wanted to show you that really quickly because I didn't get an opportunity to do that last time. And then lastly, a question I get really frequently is about embedding content. So as I had mentioned in the first session, when you're including content from, let's say, YouTube, you're able to just simply copy and paste the link of that YouTube, video and paste it directly into your book, and it will render. So here, I was just listening to Simon and Garfunkel, so there is a link of the oh, no, it's not working. 1 second. Once you just copy and paste the link of that directly into the book, that's interesting. And go to view chapter. It should load. I don't know if I have, yes, it's encased in a div for some reason. But if I were to take this out, hopefully. There you go. You see that it embeds. Sorry for the little error there for momentarily. I accidentally had some extra formatting around it, but if you just copy and paste the video, it will begin to play directly in the browser. This is not the case for all media. If you are looking to, there are a set number of domains under the OEmbed list for WordPress. All of the sites that are in here, in this list, you are able to hypothetically just embed directly into your book, and it should embed for you just like the YouTube video. The reason for that is because Pressbooks is built on top of WordPress. So whatever sort of WordPress allows, we have directly inherited. However, if you do not see this on this list, which I will now include in the chat, you will have to iFrame your content, which is sort of a more elaborate way of embedding, is sort of what I'd like to think in my layman terms. And that just means that you need to find the iFrame code behind that media file, and then you should be able to embed it directly into your book. So let's say that I go to maps.google.com and I want to show a map of Montreal, which is where Pressbooks is based out of. And let's say that I want to embed this map. Most of the time for media, they will offer you an embedding code. You know that that's the case if there's an iframe in that code. So I'm going to copy this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this into the text editor. And what that means is once I embed my content, you can see that it's been beautifully brought in. However, if I were to just copy and paste the link of the URL, it would not do anything. It would just print as this long string. So it's important that you have a look at that embedding list, see what's available directly from WordPress versus what you might have to iframe content for. And from here, I'll click save. And when I go to view my chapter, everything that you see on here is beautifully presented on the map itself, and you can see that I can interact with it. If you are an end user, what you'll have to do if you want to iframe content is you'll have to get in contact with your network manager, who has to allow list the domain in their network settings. For any network manager who would like to know a little bit more about that, there is more information in the network manager guide on how you can allow list domains. And for the end user, there's information on the user guide about how you can iframe content. But this means that there's a variety of different content that you can embed onto your Pressbooks book beyond, a YouTube video and your image. And it's a great way to incorporate more content into your interactive webbook. So that is a little bit more about embedding content. We're sort of heading into the last part of this demo. The last two things that I wanted to cover are math and accessibility. So I'll dive into math first. So heading back into the into my admin panel of my book, under settings, you'll see that there is this thing called MathJax. MathJax is the tool that Pressbooks uses by default to format its math. The reason why we use MathJax, we have been for a couple of years now as our default tool, is because MathJax is a really accessible tool. It's a really great way to use math in a very sort of simple and linear and clear way. And all it takes is any of these syntaxes here to format your math. I think this is the most common one that I see. And when you actually go to edit, when you're editing a chapter and you are trying to insert math, it says LaTeX here. When you enter your math into here, it formats into MathJax. It formats using MathJax. So we rely on MathJax to format our math for us. like I said, because it is highly accessible. And this is all that the settings page has. And up top, you'll see the equation. So if you're able to see this equation in full, then it's configured correctly and you're good to go. You can choose the text color and you can also choose the font. So it just takes for you to use the syntax for it to render. However, if you are interested in using higher level math and you need to declare different packages or need to create models, MathJax might not exactly fit your needs. You might need a more complex tool that can handle a higher level of math. And the way that you would enable for that is to go into the plugins menu again and activate WP Quick LaTeX. So WP stands for WordPress. This is the default WordPress tool that Pressbooks actually, when Pressbooks was created, we were using WP Quick LaTeX, and then once a couple of years ago, when we started having a larger educational focus, we moved on into MathJax because it was more accessible. However, WP Quick LaTeX is still available for you, and like I said, just go into the plugins menu, activate it, and you will now see that instead of MathJax, you'll see Quick LaTeX under here. I am no whiz in math. However, you can see here by reading the instructions that there are a variety of different things that you can do here. There's many more settings than there are available in MathJax. And by and large, what I like to say is if you don't know what's going on here, then chances are you probably, or rather if this doesn't really speak to you, then chances are whatever you want to fulfill with math can likely be done with MathJax. And it's the tool that we recommend because it's the one that we support far more than WP Quick LaTeX. So it's here. I just want to let you know that it's here. And if for whatever reason, if you do not want to use WP Quick LaTeX anymore, you just have to click deactivate and MathJax will automatically be re-enabled. The reason why we use MathJax, like I said, is it's more accessible and it's a great tool to use in a simple way. WP Quick LaTeX, you can declare a wider variety of packages that MathJax does not support. The one thing that I want to point out here that you might have caught on to is that you cannot use both at the same time. Otherwise, Pressbooks, our software will be very confused about which tool it's using to configure and rather format your math. So just keep that in mind and use at your discretion. The last thing that I wanted to touch is about accessibility. We have a guide chapter about accessibility here, about making your book accessible and inclusive. You can read all about publishing accessible content on the web, in the PDF and in the ebook. You can also see the accessibility features provided by Pressbooks. And if you are interested in translating your Pressbooks into a different language that's not already available, you can do so down here. We had someone translate the entirety of Pressbooks into Turkish last year in about 2 weeks, which was very impressive. So if this is something that interests you, you are more than welcome to do that. But this is our Pressbooks level chapter on making your book inclusive. We also, on our website, if you go down to the bottom, there is this page called EDU Procurement Helper, and we have an entire page on accessibility. This is obviously less at the user level and more at the administrative level, but however, if this does interest you and you're interested in reading about our accessibility standards and commitments, that is here as well. But beyond that, there are a couple of other resources that I wanted to share with you. Firstly, being this BC Campus resource. If you are familiar with the Open Ed community, you know that BC Campus they are an amazing organization. They use Pressbooks open source, but here's a book on the accessibility toolkit. And what I love about this book so much is that I think everyone in Pressbooks still relies on this book to this day, because it has best practices for each different kind of thing, right? So what's the most accessible way to incorporate links, or what's the most accessible way to what's the most accessible font size, for example. So it's a great place to rely on when you're looking for specific tidbits. It's not very it's not very flowery, rather it's very succinct and to the point and super effective. So it's a great resource to have, and I'll include that in the chat here. And then the last thing is if you're more interested in about digital accessibility at the Ryerson University Chang School of Continuing Education, they have many different books about accessibility and different concepts sort of outside of just, creating your book about, digital accessibility practices, et cetera. If that interests you, all of these books are on here. They even have a game, which I think is really fun. And the Chang School does some amazing stuff around digital pedagogy and have great resources to offer. The reason why we emphasize accessibility is because accessibility and universal design are super important for all users, especially for ones who are getting started out, because as you know, when you're getting started out with any project, to have those practices sort of set is super important. So they're low effort and high impact. So it's sort of a win-win situation. And the ways that you can get started really easily is to, if I go back, that this chapter touches on, is that alt text is a really good way to get started in accessible practices. So in all of your images, including alt text, so that a screen reader can catch it. And, for whatever reason, if your image does not render, the alt text will show up in place of the image. Another thing that you can really do easily is to make sure that headings are used sequentially, because structure and organization is important so that everyone has access to the same access to these texts, no matter the modality that they're coming from. So not skipping over headings, even if it looks, weird to you, going from heading 1 to 2 to 3 is really important. And then the last thing that I want to point out that I do cover in this chapter is that we have tried to make sure that Pressbooks is a platform that is as accessible as possible to use and create content with. And in that, and on our accessibility specific page, we have an official policy, and we also have a VPAT, which is a document for compatibility and accessibility guidelines. And we've received help from the Ontario College of Art and Design to make Pressbooks more accessible. If you have any comments about accessibility that you'd like to make, please get in contact with us, and we would love to hear what you have to say. So that rounds out the entire session. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll stop the recording here.